Okay, welcome back everybody to part 2 of the RagNext battle tutorial. So to start here, we're going to jump back to our player, and there's a few things we need to clean up on the player that we did not take care of in part 1. First of all, we're going to have our player start with the bag. Since we made the bag, he is going to need that to be able to open and look inside. In addition, the player has several attributes that we're going to assign, and when you are building your own, you can play with these as you'd like, but we're going to add a max health, and the reason why we're creating them within the player attribute is it's just a nice way to handle player-specific variables, essentially. You can think of them as variables. And the player's max health is going to be 100. And we'll also need a cur health, which of course will start at 100, but that will change as we go along. Additionally, the player has some magic. So we're going to set the max magic. We're just going to do 50. And we can add attribute for cur magic. And that will decrease as the player casts spells, as you saw in the demo. Let's see, what else will we need? Oh, he also needs an attack power. So let's give that. We'll do attack power of 10. And this attack power is used to help us determine if the player was able to hit a monster. We take our random roll and we add attack power, as you'll see. And you can make your own systems and logic however you see fit, but this is a simple version and it's just used really for demonstration purposes, but you can make your battle systems as complicated as you like. We're also going to have a defense of 5 that will help us determine if we get hit or if he misses, and you'll see how we do that later. So we have all of those set up. So now we can jump into our fight object. And before I get too far, let's go ahead and establish our inventory and skills object. First of all, we got to turn on the interactive mode, and let's give it the proper sheet here, which is not special bag. There we go. So the inventory object is going to have the bag, and then we're going to add the potions within it. Let's also enable a skills object, and that I think is special. I called it. Where's special? There it is. So look at this fancy guy. This will contain our skills that you'll be able to select if you remember from the game. But let's jump into the fight object. And I'm going to start demonstrating just what the heck do we do with this blank screen. So let's jump into our focus mode and let's start adding some hotspots. And so when you add a hotspot, you'll see here we have a new button. You can click and drag and move it around. You can also reshape it as you see fit. What we're going to do is name this as mon name. So this is going to be the monster's name. We're going to slap that up here. Let's see, right about there. And we'll stretch it out. So that's an easy way that you can kind of adjust and fit your hotspots. Now, there are several different types of hotspots. And what you see here on the style is the type. Invisible, we're going to use that, but not for this. For this, it is a text label or text button, so you can do either. So we're going to click text label, and down here now you can see you can fill in a label text and some other information. Now, the monster's name is going to go here. So if you remember, we set those variables. Variables dot, what is it? Cur mon name, right? Yep. So there we go. So the cur mon name will show up here. Now, you notice the text right now is black background with white. We don't want that. What I want to do is set the background to transparent. So if you drag your opacity highlighter down to the bottom, this becomes transparent. And you can see here on the preview that we no longer have that black background, but it shows the page behind it. And I found that black text looks a little bit better. So let's go ahead and select black. You can see here it typed in black. And for the font size, I want to bump it up a little bit for the monster name. Let's make it 18. And there we go. So that's how you can set hotspots up. So let me show you a few more so you get a feel for it. And then I'll just jump ahead and take care of it. But let's say, for example, next we're going to do, let's add a hotspot for the text over here, which if you remember has the player on the left side and the monster on the right. So this will just be simply saying player. Let's fill that in. And I'll do it just a couple more times just so you get a feel for it. And if you remember, we're going to make it transparent and black. And this is just going to simply say player. We're going to drag that up here. Let's try to center it. Let's see. How do I want? Kind of like that. Something like that, I think. Looks about right. All right, so player is, let's look at, I'm going to just make it kind of round numbers here. We'll make the width 17 and the height be 6. And we'll just go ahead and keep the font at 18. So I like the look of that. Great. And then the monster name will be the same as that. So let me fill in a few more here. And then when I get to something a little more interesting, I will share that with you. Okay, I just wanted to show you real quick how I'm setting the monster's health. I already set the player's health. I'll just show that real quick. And you can see here on the label text, the health is the player attribute's current health, and then I add a slash, and then his max health. So very similar. We're going to do the monster's health, but we're going to use health, and this time we're going to do the what is it, Kermon health, which tracks his current health over, and then we have to get the max health, which is currently in that array variable. So we do that with variables dot monsters, and here you can start seeing how we're tracking our monsters. And we're going to do our monsters, not max HP. So here it is. So in order to get the monster's max HP, we have this row index. And fortunately, we saved that, which is in yet another variable. So let's go ahead and put in that variable, which is variables.kermon. What is it? Kermonster index. There it is. So Kermonster index, right? So this is going to our array variable called monsters, grabbing the max HP value out of it based on the current monster index. So that's how you'll see his health, like 20 out of 20 or 17 out of 20, whatever it happens to be. It should come through correctly in there. And then the player also has a magic setting. So let's go ahead and add the player magic. There we go. And we're going to call this player magic. The name doesn't really matter too much, except if you're trying to enable or disable hotspots, you'll have to refer to it by name. And let's go ahead and align our player magic correctly. You know, they look like they should shift over just a touch. So let's go ahead and do that. And so player magic is a text and it's going to say magic, and this is the player's attributes. So what is it? Cur magic. So player attributes cur magic, and that will be followed by the max magic right there. There we go. So now it will correct, well, it won't correctly display yet. Let's go ahead and make sure we are setting this correctly. Oh no, I'm on player. Why have I done that? Okay, let's jump back here. Let's fix this first of all. This should just say player, like it used to. And let's click on our element here, player magic. There we go. And player magic should be text. There we go. Whoop. Switched on me. There we go, text. And this is going to do what I just did, magic, which is cur magic slash, and then max magic, the player attribute max magic. Okay, now let's fix the coloring here. It should be transparent with black on the text, and then we're going to make it 18. So that's how we set up our data, and you can do that however you like as well in yours. But now let's move on to the enemy portrait, because that will be dynamically changing based on which monster has been selected. So let's go up here, let's add a hotspot. There we go. In this hotspot, we're going to fill in the area here, and we're going to call this monster portrait. And let's just go ahead and make the height to be, what do I want it to be? I think 30 is good for the height. It will come out a little bit better in the player, I know from practice. And then this hover grow effect, when you move your cursor over, some items, if you notice, would hover or grow, and some we don't want that to happen. So for the monster portrait, we don't need a grow effect. Also, when we hover over the name, we don't need it to grow either. But let's go ahead and set the portrait to an image button, because we are going to be displaying an image this time. So in order to set the image, we set our image asset ID template at the very bottom here. And this time, we're going to use another of those variables we set, which is, what is it? Cur mon portrait. There it is. So we're just setting the variable cur mon portrait because it's dynamic. It will be able to pick the correct image that we need. And the font color doesn't matter because we're not going to be displaying anything, nor does the font size in this case. So we're just going to have our enemy portrait, and that will be updated dynamically. Now let's go ahead and add some more. And what you're going to see here is I'm just going to cover over our buttons. And in this case, these are going to remain invisible because we don't need anything really to happen here. We're going to call this attack. I'm going to make the rest of these invisible, including items and special. So I'll be back in just a minute after I've set all of these to invisible. Okay, we are back. And so I've added, you saw the attack. We also have magic, defend, run, items, and special. And they are all set to invisible. So all that means is that player won't see anything, but they'll click on the attack icon, magic, whatever, and we'll be able to call our functions. Now there's one last element we're going to add, and that is the battle text. And you saw the battle text on the previous screen, kind of at the bottom. Let's see, kind of right here. We'll go ahead and stretch that out, make it fairly wide, kind of like that. And this is going to be text, of course. And this is where we're going to keep adding text. My scroll bar keeps hitting that and it pulls it down. So we're going to be adding text here dynamically as the battle goes on. So all your messages will show up here. You'll be able to scroll. We're going to make it a little smaller because there's a lot of text. There we go, 12. We're going to make the font black and the background will not be black and black. And we're going to make that transparent. So there we go. And scroll bars get added automatically as more data gets added to this system. So that's really it for our fight screen. Now, let's think about how we want to approach this. Okay, I think the best way to go forward before we start attacking and magicking and pulling out items is to set up our attack functions. So when we do attack or magic or do special items, we can actually damage the monsters. So let's go ahead and exit our focus mode. Let's go into our functions and let's look at player attack, because this is really going to be the heart of the system. So in order to do this, I'm going to copy some code over real quick and walk you through what I've done. All right, we are back at it, and you can see I pulled over some code. This is how we're going to do the player attack. And there's a lot of code. Let me zoom out. Technically, this is considered a no-code solution, really. But, scripting logic, I would say. But we do quite a few commands and conditions in here, and I'm going to walk you through exactly why we have to do all this and what it's doing for us on the player attack. If you remember, we wanted to create a min damage and max damage variable that we're going to set before we call the player attack function. And this function will be called whether we're shooting lightning bolts or fireballs. So I had to make it somewhat generic, which makes sense. But this is how I've set up the battle engine. So first we're going to start with a random roll. And I'm doing, a 20-sided dice kind of roll, if you will. And what we're adding to that roll is the player's attack power. So that's how my battle engine is going to work. Depending on the attack power, that will add to their roll to see if we are able to hit the enemy, or if the enemy is able to hit you, for example. I'm just, for our peace of mind, I'm going to display what the roll was so that we can track that. And in this case, it will show a D20 plus attack power. So it could be, I think our attack power was 10, so it could be as high as 30 in this case. So then we're going to do a comparison. We're going to look at the random roll, and then we're going to look at the current monster's defense. So if the monster's defense is 5 and somehow you get under that, then you're going to miss. And so in case you do miss, let's follow that first. So let's follow this false path. So if you do miss, we're going to add to the battle text variable. So we're going to take the current data or text that's in battle text, put that in there and say you attack the current monster name, but miss. And then it's going to be the monster's turn to attack back. So we're going to call the function monster attack. Now let's look and see what happens if you do happen to hit the monster. First, we will use a number holder, just hold a temporary number. We're going to do a random roll of that minimum damage and maximum damage. So if it's 2 to 12, we'll roll in between there. If it's 1 to 6, we'll roll in between there. And once we get that result in number holder, we're going to decrement the current monster's health by that amount, right? And then we're going to let the person know in our battle text, you strike the monster for whatever that damage was. Finally, we have to see if the monster is dead. So if the monster's health is less than or equal to 0, then we say victory, you've defeated the monster, and we'll close the interactive screen. But if not, then the monster gets his chance to attack back. So after we close that interactive screen, because the monster has been defeated, we increment our monsters killed because we want to kill 5 monsters to win the game. So have we killed those 5 monsters? If true, we're going to end the game with a victory message. Victory is yours. Congratulations. So if we haven't reached 5 yet, we will just continue on. So that is how the player attack works. Now, you remember the monster gets to attack back. So let's go ahead and look at that code. All right. So here is the monster attack code. So let's see what happens here. First, we're doing that random roll again that you're familiar with, but this time, instead of the player's attack power, we're adding the monster's attack power. And then we highlight the roll so we can track that just for our sake, peace of mind and sanity. And then we're going to look and see if the roll is greater than or equal to the player's defense. I think we have the defense set kind of low. I believe it was at 5 or something like that. So if the player's defense is greater than the attack roll, we say the monster attacks you but misses, and that's it. There's nothing more to it. But if the monster does happen to hit you, we have to figure out how much damage the monster did. So we start with 1 and we look at the monster's current attack power. And that's the amount of damage that they can potentially do to you. And then we're going to decrease the player's current health. And we do that within the value setting here. So we're using one of our functions, and I had mentioned it, that we're going to be doing this. And let me expand this. Hold on. Let me make it a little bigger. There we go. So what we're looking at is we want to take the maximum value of either of these. So right now we have the player's attributes, current health, minus the damage that was done, or 0. So what I'm trying to do here is make sure the player's health gets set to 0, even if it's, say, -3. So if it's -3, we're going to take 0. And so that's how we know what the player's health is currently at. If it's still above 0, like 2 or 3, whatever, it obviously will take that over 0. But this just kind of caps 0 as the smallest amount of health that the player can have. And then we're going to set some more battle text. The monster hits you for whatever damage that was done. And then we have to check and see if the player is dead. So if the player's current health is 0, then we're going to say, sorry, your adventure has ended in death. So those are our monster attack and player attack. So let's jump back now to our fight object and look at what the heck we're going to do with attack. And what you can see here on this page is that within our interactive objects or screens, there is this edit hotspot action steps. So rather than creating actions like in your main screen, like examine or take or show map, when someone clicks on attack, we're going to execute all of the action steps within here. And there's not a lot we have to do because we've done all of the hard work already within our functions. So all we have to do, I'm going to paste some code over here, and all we have to do now is set the minimum damage and the maximum damage. And in this case, with a simple attack, we're just going to do 1 for the minimum, and the max damage could be the player's attack power, whatever we set that at. And then I have a sound effect that I'm going to play, and it's just a sword swing. And let's see if we can hear that. Yeah, it's just very quick. So I'm going to shrink this down here a little bit. There we go. That's all we need. So we're going to play a little sound effect, and then we're going to call the function player attack. And then all the attack information will be handled. So that's done. So for magic, what are we going to do here? I made it very simple. It's just a similar attack, but with a different sound effect, just to make it easy on us. So let's go ahead and jump into our magic, and we'll paste in some code here as well. What you can see here, I'm just setting it from 1 to 7. You know, you could do whatever you want. You can get as creative or clever as you'd like. And I'm just going to do our fireball blast. And doesn't need to be quite that long. And I like the reverb, so we'll keep a little reverb in there. We'll just kind of end it there. And then we'll call player attack. And that's all we have to do in the attack button. So if the player wants to defend, what do we want to do here? Let me think here. You can set up your battle logic the way you want. I just made it very basic just to show some effects and what we can do here. So all I'm doing here is I'll let the player know they're trying to defend. And then I'll do our screen shake effect. And screen shake can be set from very low to extreme. I'm just going right in the middle. And the duration is 0.3 seconds, just a short little bump. And I'm going to just let the monster attack. Really, defend doesn't give you any bonuses in this example, but it's just a way to add options. You can obviously, in your own game, make defend, give him a boost or something. And then next we're going to do run. And with run, I made it very easy for testing for us. And run is just going to end the combat for us. So we're going to just pop up a message, and I titled it Cowardly Retreat. And it says you run from the monster like a coward. And then we're going to close the interactive screen. And that's all it does. And that's all we really needed to do. Now with our text here, I don't believe I ever set the label correctly. Let's go ahead and set this to battle text, because we need our battle text variable in there so we can actually see what's happening. Finally, we've got items and special. So before we go into the items, let's go back and revisit our functions. And I have this populate bag function. And what I want to do with the populate bag is a couple things. I want to demonstrate how you can loop through your items and populate things based on the looping commands. And many of you probably haven't seen those looping commands before. And all we're going to do is loop through them, and I'm going to use some switch variables in here. I'm just going to show you some of the cool, exciting features we can do with populate bag and some of these features. So let's go ahead and paste that in here, and I will tell you all about it. So here's our populate bag. And what we start with is a loop command, and you see our exits here are loop body and completed. So once all the looping's done, if you have extra commands you want to do after it completes, you can do that here. I do not have that in this case. So we're going to loop through a variable, and there's different types of loops. You can loop through items, all the items in your game, all the characters, rooms. We're just going to do variable, and the variable is inventory. And for filtering, you can filter. It's more for like items. If the items are inventory worn, we're just going to do everything. So we're going to loop through every row of inventory. So as we loop through, we're going to see if the quantity, and you see I'm using a loop variable here. When you're in a loop, you don't need to worry about the variable name or anything. You can just use this loop variable. Let me just show you that. So when you do loop, it grabs the column name. So it automatically populated image, name, and quantity based on what we're looking at, which is, in this case, the inventory array variable. So if the quantity is greater than 0, that means we're going to show the item. And so what we do is we look at if it's a health potion or mana potion, And if it is health potion, we'll set the hotspot to active. And if it's less than 0 or 0 or less, that means we don't have any, we deactivate those hotspots. Now I haven't set those hotspots yet, so let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back to this function and finish it up. So let's go ahead and get to decorating. We'll go into our inventory object. We'll go into our focus mode. We're going to add a health potion. And we're going to add also a mana potion. So let's look at our health potion. It's going to be an image. Here we go. And it's going to be our health potion. There it is. Okay. Let's just drag it up here roughly. Put it about there. Does that look about right? Let's see, let's just make it 30 instead of 29.1. It looks a little low. Let me just make it a little higher there. And in this case, I am going to add some label text. I'm just going to say health. We'll just keep it white text on black lettering, just as it is. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and add the mana potion now. We'll just call it mana potion. There we go. We're going to position this about the same spot. Looks like there. Is that about, what did we do? 17 by 30. Just want to keep it somewhat consistent. And instead of invisible, it is, of course, an image. And let's pick our mana potion. There we go. We've got our mana potion. Oh, let's add the label here. We'll call it mana. All right, great. So these are our hotspots that we're going to activate or deactivate depending on the state. So let's exit our focus mode. Let's go back to our function. Let's go back into populate bag. So if we have greater than 0, we're going to make sure they're shown. So the health potion goes up here, and we're going to, you see all of the hotspots we've created, they're accessible here. This one is called health potion, should be active. And this one should be our mana potion. There it is, and that's active. Then down here, we want to turn off our, let's see, health potion. There we go. So this turns off the health potion. It's no longer clickable. And this will be the mana potion. There we go. So now we've got everything set up to either show or not show our mana potions. So we've already hit 30 minutes. I can't believe it. Time is flying. So let's pause it here, and we will pick up and hopefully finish in the next episode. Bye, guys.